Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today in the shop we have an absolute blast from the past. This is a 1985 Honda Elite 150 Deluxe. Now there's one big difference between the Honda Elite 150 base model and the Deluxe, and that is the Deluxe models have this retractable headlight. Now anyone with a retractable headlight on their car knows the mechanism is extremely complex, and that means it's prone to problems. And this little bike here is suffering some of those issues. The headlight at the moment is not operational. It's stuck in the up position. So today we're going to see if we can get it working again. Now here's how this headlight is supposed to operate. When you turn the key on, the headlight should pop up. When you turn the key off, the headlight should retract back down into this front hood. Now of course the headlight here is coming on. It shows that we at least have some power going to the circuit, but it's not operating correctly. As I said before, this is a pretty common issue for this kind of bike, and I've actually only seen one Elite 150 in the wild with an operating headlight, and it's the one I took the video of earlier. So hopefully we can find a pretty easy solution for this and get more of these Elite 150s operating again. But our first step is going to be to get this hood up, get access to the headlight mechanism, check everything out there, and also check the circuitry, make sure that we're getting power in the correct places. Just has a couple of thumb screws. You know what, I think I'm just going to take this hood all the way off. I don't think you're going to be able to see what I'm doing in there. All right, so here is the motor retracting mechanism. So basically we have this arm here going to a little heim joint that brings the headlight back into its parked position. Now, Honda, of course, was kind of one step ahead, and they knew that this might be an issue, and it's very unsafe to ride a motorcycle without a headlight. So they added this little safety wheel here. This is a way for you to manually operate the headlight in case that the mechanism fails in any sort of way. So basically what you do is you disconnect this little bullet connector here. This is the ground for the whole circuit. Ooh, and when you plug this in, you can hear a relay clicking. And you disconnect that, so now the motor cannot operate. It cannot try to force itself open or close. So if it was stuck this way, you would just turn the wheel this way, and it brings the mechanism to an upright position. Now you can see there's a lot of different little pieces that have to be perfectly aligned and calibrated. It's like in a modern vehicle you would have, you know, all different kinds of controls and sensors, but this is long before computers had taken over the automotive and scooter world. So all of this is with, you know, basic mechanisms, like there's a microswitch, there's a relay. First thing we need to do is we need to test the microswitch. Then we will see if we're getting the correct outputs out of the harness for the control, and make sure that this problem exists within the motor itself and not within some sort of wiring issue in the bike. Now this microswitch here is the first thing that the manual says to test. So what we're going to do is pull these little connectors off, expose the pins, and we'll use a multimeter to see if it's operating correctly. All right, so I've got the meter hooked up to the microswitch, and the microswitch is supposed to operate in this way. You should be open when the switch is not depressed, and when you depress the switch, you should have continuity. So let's just check that. Perfect. All right, here is the connector for the retractable headlight mechanism. It's a real basic 4-pin connector. On a Honda, the green is always ground, and then you have a black wire, a green wire with a white tracer, and a red wire. Now, according to the wiring schematic, the red wire should always be hot, so let's just check that with a test light. Okay, we got our battery voltage there. Now, the black wire should only be hot with the key in the on position, so let's check that next. Okay, I've got no power there, but if I turn the key on, I get power. Perfect. And then the green wire with white tracer should be hot with the key in the off position. So that's what retracts the mechanism when you turn the key off. So let's check that. There we go, off position, got power. So at this point, it looks like the retracting mechanism has everything that it should need. We must have an issue mechanically inside the motor. Now this customer was fortunate enough to find a replacement retractable headlight assembly. Apparently this one was in working condition when it was removed from the bike. So we're going to plug it in and see what she does. All right, so we've got the new motor installed, but we've hit just a bit of a snag. When I turn the key into the on position, the headlight should raise. So here's the key in the on position, and it does not raise. Now if I give it just a little bit of help by rotating this knob, it acts just as it should. Now if I put the key in the off position, it should retract. It does not. So once again, if I just give it a little bit of help, it goes ahead and retracts itself. We know the mechanism is working, but I'm not quite sure if it's the setup. There's a very specific procedure to clock this, or if, maybe the grease inside this little motor gear case is just a little bit old and dried up. Something else that I think is really interesting and a little bit fun is this limit switch that we tested earlier illuminates a light on the dash to let you know the headlight has not reached its park up position. Pretty neat. All right, so first thing we're going to do is adjust this clocking nut to make sure everything is in spec. And if that doesn't work, we're going to have to yank it back out, open it up, and check the grease. All right, so I've got the control arm detached from the headlight assembly now. And this is the way it's supposed to be set up to do the adjustment as per the service manual. Now the service manual says that you need to rotate this arm up using the emergency wheel until it touches this little bump stop here. But what I found is pretty neat is this thing works really well. It might just be a little bit of lubrication needed in some of the assembly, because if I bring it up, right now it's in the off position, so it should be parked. So if I bring it up, it hits the limit switch and brings itself back down. So we know we're really, really, really close. It's probably just an adjustment. So just disconnect this so the motor doesn't run. Now we'll bring this arm up till it touches this little bump stop here on the top. Okay, now we're supposed to clock it by loosening this nut. And there's a little scale window here through the sides that's divided into certain specific increments. So it says to move the motor assembly 1 degree. And we'll rotate this. There we go, 1 degree. Lock it back down in place. See if that does anything for us. Plug it back in. Okay, it parked like it should, but it did not raise without any help. And it does not park with the key off. It still needs help to park with the key off. So, looks like we're gonna need to pull this unit off again, take the cover off the back side of it, and maybe we can see a little bit of worn grease or some sort of lubrication point we can access. All right, so we got the retractable motor assembly up on the workbench. So I'm just gonna take this cover off and see if we can identify any sort of issue. All right, and here's the internal mechanism. So you see you've got a worm gear here off a little DC motor. There's some little control circuit board here that tells it something. I wonder if that's an internal load limit switch. And then this gear rotates around, and this is a rack. So this gear only needs to rotate one direction. Here, I can operate it from the wheel. So as that rotates, pushes the rack forward, and then the rack somehow knows how to park and then retracts itself. Everything seems to be in pretty good shape. Doesn't mean that we couldn't add a little bit of more lubrication here and there. Make sure everything's smooth. The axle shaft looks good. Let's just add a little bit of grease here and there. A bit of grease to the rack. And a little to the worm drive. A little to these gears here too. Heck, why not under this little piece? There we go. Ooh, actually, you know what? It actually seems a lot smoother now. Let's plug it back in the bike and see what we get. All right, and as you can see, we're back on the workbench, so you know it did not work. I threw this back on the bike, made my adjustments, and it operated in about the same fashion, although it did go up and down just a little quicker, so at least we made an improvement. So we're gonna open her back up and see if we can see anything in here that is preventing the circuitry from knowing where the motor is parked, either in the up or down position. On the back side of this, we have a copper wheel. Now this copper wheel indexes on those 4 pins. And those pins tell this controller where the motor is parked. So first thing we're going to do is clean this up, make sure all those pins are making contact where they should, and see if that restores normal operation. There is quite a bit of debris on there. All the pins seem to be in really good condition. They're not all perfectly straight though. We'll just try and bend this one up just a little bit. This one too. Let's give them a bit of a wipe. Throw her back together and see if that's any different now. It was very nice of Honda to make this into a serviceable unit that you can actually remove the cover and inspect or replace components. All right, we're back here at the bench, and as you can tell, that last little attempt did not repair our issue. So we need to open her back up and see if we can find out what is actually causing this thing to not run. Okay, I figure now we'll take a look at that little circuit board to see if maybe we can identify something in there. Okay, so this is a pretty basic circuit board. You can definitely see the traces where the electricity travels around this board. So I guess, well, it looks like we have a little bit of corrosion here. So as you can see where this wire lays against the circuit on the board, it looks like it's rubbed through some of the insulation on the board. Maybe we should just ohm that circuit out and see if we have continuity from this red wire. It looks like the red wire runs along to one of those little finger pads that goes back here to the commutator on the wheel. And then it also runs into circuit protector. Let's figure it out. Okay, so I've got my meter set to continuity here. Always test your leads. And I'm just going to check this trace. So it looks like it goes from this little pad down here up to here where the wire enters the board. And it looks like we have no continuity there. Check it down here. No. Okay, well, it does look like we have a break in the circuit here and possibly here. Oh yeah, that's just scraping right off. That insulation is worn almost all the way off there. So what we can attempt to do is repair that circuit with just a little bit of wire and solder, and maybe the break in that continuity is the issue that's causing this thing. You know, as we rotate it around manually, we definitely connect the circuit and the rest of it is running the motor and operating correctly. It just is not doing that initial bump to get the circuit started. We're definitely on like a blank spot of the commutator wheel here. So I guess I'll get the solder ready and meet you back here. All right, so my plan is to take a small piece of wire, strip it. This is still way too much copper, so I'm only gonna take a few strands. Maybe I'll take 3 strands out of this. And I'm gonna create my own little bridge using this twisted wire. I'll tin it with solder, tin the board with some solder. I have not really ever done this, but I've seen some YouTube videos, so might as well give it a shot. So, now we'll lay this down on the board and see if we can trace the path. All right, so I'm first gonna just try and add a little bit of solder to the board, hopefully without heating stuff up too much. Perfect. Green wire out of the way a little bit. There we go. All right, so I've got the wire soldered down here on the trace. It looks like I don't have any bridging, which is excellent. So I'm gonna take a razor and just put it down right here on the rest of this wire. I don't need any of this wire here. So I'm gonna put a razor down and just try and very, very, very carefully remove the excess wire. All right, now put the meter back in and see if we have continuity. All right, moment of truth. Got the meter sent to resistance again. Check the leads. And here we go. All right. Before I go ahead and reassemble this, I realize now I have an exposed circuit here, and I don't want this green wire to wear this again, or I don't want any bridging because of this open circuit. So I'm gonna paint an insulator over this board. Yeah, it's not the prettiest, but should be all right. All right, so we've got the unit loosely installed back on the bike, got the harness connected. We've got a repaired circuit board inside, and we have a little bit of success. This is farther than we've ever gotten. Let me show you what happens when we turn the key on. Oh, as you can tell, the arm is in the down position, so this would be headlight retracted. We just have the linkage disconnected. But if we turn the key to the on position, it raises. And if you turn the key to the off position, it retracts, which ultimately is a raging success for us. But what's giving us worry is that there is a timer module on the circuit board, and you can hear something clicking about every 30 seconds. Let me put my microphone on and see if you can hear it. Hear that click? It'll go again. And so basically we're worried that that might create a parasitic drain on the battery and drain this battery flat. The key's in the off position, so it shouldn't be doing anything at all. So now we've got to figure out how to troubleshoot that. So we ended up taking the circuit board out of the headlight module that was on his bike, and we found a very, very similar issue with the printed circuit board here, and we were able to repair that as well. The reason that we're not going to throw this board back into his original module is his was totally melted. It seemed like the motor had overheated somehow. All the connectors and the motor stays had been melted away, so it's not a usable part. But this circuit board tests the same as this one. So we're going to take it all back apart one more time. We're going to swap in his original circuit board, and hopefully the little timer module on this one is in better shape than his Facebook Marketplace part. So, back to the workbench. Alright, so I went ahead and took the old repaired circuit board and put it in the new assembly and plugged it all into the harness. And this is the moment of truth. We're going to see if we finally have this thing in an operatable condition. Here goes nothing. Key on. Up. Okay, key off, it should retract. Perfect. Alright. Looks like we finally got this one. So, now I've got to go through all the steps, get this thing reassembled and adjusted, and we'll be able to give it back to our customer. Super stoked for that. Alright, as you can see, we're back and reassembled. I didn't film the reassembly process. It looked exactly like the disassembly process with a lot more, where did this go? But we're back together, and it's the moment of truth now, the moment you've been waiting this whole video to see, the headlight operation. Just like it should. There were a lot of different micro adjustments that need to be done, adjusting the pivot on the arm, and then making little adjustments for the lid, and so that the microswitch turns the headlight on just at the very last minute. I think that's kind of the nicest touch of it. Anyway, I'm very excited to get this back to the customer. Since he's on the bike, this hasn't been operational, and as I said before, there are not very many that operate as designed left on the road. So, if you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, make sure you subscribe to the channel, ring the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of these cool projects. If you have a Honda Elite 150 and you want this headlight module rebuilt, I don't know, shoot us an email, we might be able to help you out. And until I see you next time, keep it shiny side up.